My family disowned me, pregnant and penniless 7 years ago. I'm Lila, betrayed by Jasper and Mira's lies, left with twins they never knew about. Thomas stayed. They lost all. Now I hold the power. Where are you listening from? What time is it? Share below.
This one.
This one hits deep. It started on a Saturday, one of those warm, bone-dry summer days in Austin when the live oak trees paint the sidewalks with shadows. I remember brushing stray leaves off the windshield of my car before walking into my parents' house. It felt like walking into a trap I didn't know was set. My dad had called the meeting just a casual family dinner tonight, beer by 6 message. Nothing out of the ordinary. I thought maybe it had something to do with my medical school applications or Jasper's new job or Mira's engagement party planning. But when I walked in, no food was on the table, no smells of Mom's roasted chicken or her store-bought ranch dressing, just silence and 3 people already seated on the couch like they'd been waiting. Dad didn't hug me. He didn't even stand. "You're late," he said. "Traffic on I-35, I offered, still half smiling, scanning the room for a clue. Mom stared down at her folded hands. Jasper was sitting smug like he'd just aced a test he hadn't studied for. Mira looked away, but there was something rehearsed in the tilt of her jaw, like she'd practiced this moment in front of a mirror. "Lila," Dad said, "we need to talk and we need you to sit down." That's when I knew something was wrong. I sat stiff back on the armchair closest to the window. The light behind me made their faces even harder to read. "You've been taking money," Jasper said, skipping any build-up, "from Mom and Dad's savings account." I blinked. "What?" He slid a printed statement across the coffee table, a highlighted section circled in blue marker. "A withdrawal." I started, but Dad raised a hand. Mira jumped in like she couldn't wait any longer. "And she's been seeing that divorced guy, you know, the one who works at Seton Medical Center. She tried to sleep with my fiancé, too. He told me everything. I couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the fabric of my jeans." "Are you serious right now?" I looked at her, at all of them. "You think I would touch your fiancé or steal from our parents?" "Don't lie, Lila," Mom said softly, eyes still down. "You've changed. We don't recognize who you've become. You're just sitting here throwing out accusations like they're facts." "Enough," Dad said. "We had a long talk. We've made a decision." Then came the sentence that cracked the floor beneath me. "We're removing you from the family estate, and we think it's best you leave tonight." Leave tonight? I looked around the room, at the walls with our family photos, at the spot where I used to curl up and read next to the bookshelf. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like I was a stranger they couldn't wait to forget. "You have 90 minutes, Jasper said. 90 minutes? I added. "It's in the hallway." I stood up, feeling like I was floating outside my body. I walked past them, past my mother, who didn't look at me, past Jasper and Mira, who smirked like this was a performance well executed. On the way out, I caught Dad by the trash bin in the garage. He was tossing something in. My old family photo album. "Seriously?" I asked. He shrugged. "Figured you wouldn't need this where you're going." I didn't cry. Not then. My legs carried me out to the car. I drove aimlessly, fingers trembling on the steering wheel. I ended up in a motel off Lamar Boulevard. One of those places where the curtains don't fully close and the AC unit buzzes like it's trying to escape the wall. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. No tears, just silence. Then I felt it, deep in my stomach. A pull. Not pain, exactly, but a weight I hadn't noticed before that missed my period. I got up, grabbed my purse, and walked 3 blocks to a gas station. Bought the test. Back in the room, under yellow bathroom light, I watched the lines appear. 2. Positive. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stared at the mirror, at my reflection. The motel room smelled like bleach and old carpet. Outside, the neon vacancy sign buzzed faintly. I sat at the small table near the window, the pregnancy test box still open beside me. The mirror was across the room, but I didn't need to look again. The truth was already pulsing through me like a second heartbeat. I slid open the side pocket of my duffel bag and pulled out something I hadn't touched in years, my diary. Brown leather cover fraying at the edges, pages bent from being tucked away so long. It had survived apartments, cross-country moves, one minor flood, and now this exile. Funny, I never let them know it existed. I opened to a random page, then another. My handwriting was smaller back then, more hopeful, less guarded. I scanned through a few entries about research work, library shifts, texts with Thomas, back when we were still in the flirting but pretending we're just friends. Then I saw the date that hit like a bruise. April 15th, senior year. Jasper asked me to explain the protein folding segment from our capstone. He kept nodding like he was really into it. Turns out he just repeated my whole section during the team presentation, didn't even change the wording. Professor emailed the group afterward and said Jasper showed leadership initiative. Dad printed it out and framed it. I slammed the book shut for a second. That memory still burned. I remembered how Mom clapped for him in the living room. "Your brother is finally stepping up," she said. I stood there, speechless, while he soaked in their pride with that grin that never reached his eyes. I opened the diary again, turned more pages. Mira. There she was too, always immaculate, always center stage, but it wasn't her spotlight that made her cruel, it was how she guarded it. Another entry. Grandma let me wear her old emerald necklace today. Mira saw it and said, "That should be mine. Grandma only gave it to you because she felt bad you weren't pretty enough for the talent show." I pretended not to hear her, but she made sure everyone else did. I swallowed the sting. That necklace wasn't even the half of it. What Mira didn't know, what no one did, was that Grandma had secretly left me her engagement ring. A little silver band with a ruby center. I kept it hidden inside a hollowed-out book. It was the one thing I had from someone who saw me. She saw me. A month after Grandma died, Mira stood in the backyard during a family brunch and announced she was going to use Grandma's ring as her something old for the engagement. No one corrected her. I stayed quiet. I wasn't brave then. Not yet. And her engagement. God, they let me come. Gave me a seat in the 5th row near the speakers. When the time came for speeches, I stepped up to the mic, and it cut out. Mira waved it off with a laugh. "Technical glitch," she said. Heard her tend to the crowd and launched into her own toast. The mic worked just fine for her. Back in the motel room, I looked around like the walls might offer comfort. They didn't. I glanced at the test again, still positive, as if the line had deepened overnight. I reread the instructions, like maybe I had misinterpreted. I hadn't. The weight of the truth pressed against me. Not just the babies, but the realization that I'd never really been one of them. Not in their eyes. I was tolerated, never treasured. My phone vibrated on the table, an unsaved number. I almost didn't pick it up. The text preview read, "I'm coming to Austin. If it's true, you're not alone. Thomas." I didn't even tell him, not yet, but somehow he knew, or maybe he'd always sensed it, and for the first time since I was thrown out, something inside me stopped trembling. The man who still looked at me kindly. I didn't know how long I stood there after reading Thomas's message, just staring at the screen like it might change. The motel room felt too small for the shift happening in my chest. The window was cracked open a few inches, letting in dry Texas air and the distant hum of traffic. The silence around me was thick, but I wasn't entirely alone anymore. There was a knock. It wasn't loud, just a steady, familiar rhythm. I froze, phone still in hand. Then I crossed the room and opened the door. He looked the same, but also like he'd been through something of his own. Thomas stood there in a blue shirt, the sleeves rolled just enough to show the faint tan lines on his arms. His eyes met mine gently, not searching for an explanation or a performance. Just presence. "You okay?" he asked. So I stepped back and he came in. We didn't hug, didn't cry. There wasn't that kind of drama. He just sat in the chair near the window while I perched on the edge of the bed, like someone visiting a stranger's house. The silence stretched between us, not awkward but heavy with everything unspoken. Eventually, I whispered, "I didn't expect you to come." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the small table by the bed where the pregnancy test still sat next to an empty water bottle. He didn't point, didn't question, just said, "Want to get out of here for a bit?" I nodded. We drove in his truck, an older Chevy, the kind that vibrates just enough to make conversation easy to postpone. He parked outside a small diner with cracked vinyl booths and windows that hadn't been washed properly in years. The kind of place where no one cared who you were as long as you paid in cash and tipped halfway decent. We sat at a booth by the window. Thomas ordered tea for us both, iced. The waitress didn't bother with a menu. Neither of us were here for food. He looked at me once the tea arrived and said, "You don't owe me anything." "I'm pregnant," I said. I didn't even ease into it. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. He just reached for a paper napkin, grabbed a pen from his jacket pocket and scribbled something, then slid it across the table. One word. Together. I stared at it like it was a language I hadn't seen in years. "I don't want to run," he said. I laughed, a short breath that wasn't quite humor. "You don't know what you're signing up for." "Maybe not, but I know what I walked away from." He told me then about his family, old money from the Midwest, real estate and tech startups, and expectations thicker than blood. They wanted him to marry the right girl, invest in the right projects, say the right things at the right fundraiser. He'd left it all. "You don't know this," he said, "but I saw the way your brother talked over you during that research symposium. I saw the poster you made. I knew whose work it was." My fingers tightened around the tea glass. I hadn't thought anyone had noticed. Jasper had strutted across that stage like he'd built the whole concept. My name wasn't even in the footnotes. "He took the credit because he knew they'd believe him more than you," Thomas said. I looked out the window. A teenage boy in a hoodie crossed the parking lot, skateboard in one hand, headphones around his neck. The world was still spinning, life was still moving, even after everything had come apart. "Mira used to tell people I was the weird one," I said, almost smiling. "She used to say I was Grandma's favorite because I liked science more than parties. She resented your closeness with her. She resented that you didn't need her approval to breathe." He nodded. We talked for nearly an hour. No interruptions, no performances, just truth told plainly between sips of bad tea. I told him about the estate being rewritten, about the accusations, about the 90 minutes I was given to leave and the photo album that landed in the trash. I told him about the motel and the nausea and the mirror and the test strip that confirmed something terrifying and holy all at once. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I'd cried all I had to cry before I even called the front desk for extra towels. When we left the diner, the sun had started its slow descent toward the west. The air had cooled, but the sidewalk still radiated heat. We walked past the edge of the lot, where the pavement gave way to wild grass. Agaves, tall and stoic, like silent witnesses. He didn't rush the silence, he let it stretch. Then he reached for my hand. "I'm not asking you to forgive them," he said. "But I'd like to help you build something better." I didn't answer, but I didn't pull away either. I looked down at my stomach, then up at the sky, open and endless. The next morning, I sat up slowly on the pull-out couch, sunlight slipping through the blinds of Thomas's apartment. It wasn't a luxurious place. 3 rooms, bare walls, a coffee maker that grumbled louder than it brewed. But it was the first space in months where I'd woken up without flinching. No yelling, no glares, no walls closing in. I swung my legs over the edge and sat for a minute, letting my hands rest on the soft rise of my belly. Still small, still hidden to the world, but not to me. On Thomas's little kitchen counter was a note. "Went to pick up more coffee. Don't leave without breakfast." I smiled, just barely, then turned on my phone. Dozens of unread notifications blinked at me from apps I should have deleted months ago. My sister's Instagram, another party, another fake smile. My brother tagging himself at our parents' house with the caption, "Fridays are for family." I hadn't even realized it was Friday night. "Are you sure?" Yes, I deleted all of them one by one. Jasper, Mom, Dad, even the ones that just said home. I didn't want reminders of a place that had thrown me out like rotted leftovers. I stopped checking their social media, logged out, not out of spite, out of self-preservation. I wasn't erasing them to hurt anyone. I was erasing them so I could finally see myself clearly again. That afternoon, I called a women's clinic under a different name, Clara Evans. It wasn't the first name I'd thought of, but it came easily. Clara sounded like someone no one would be looking for, someone no one had erased. I paid in cash, sat in the waiting room between a teenager chewing her sleeve and a woman my mother's age who looked like she hadn't eaten since Wednesday. The nurse didn't ask many questions, just took my vitals, scheduled a follow-up, and handed me a printout about prenatal nutrition with a smile that didn't feel rehearsed. No family insurance, no emergency contact, just me, a clipboard, and the silent promise that I would figure this out. I wasn't just carrying children. I was carrying a future that no one else would shape this time. Later that month, I spent hours at the Central Library in Austin. Not the glamorous part with coffee shops and murals, the older wing, where the computers still whirred and every desk wobbled just slightly to the left. I researched grant programs, legal frameworks, basic startup structures. I didn't know what I was doing, not completely, but I knew what I wanted to build. A medtech company based on the thesis that Jasper had once pitched as his own. This time, my name would be on every page. Thomas never hovered. He didn't offer to fix things. He just made sure I ate, brought me backup pens, and sometimes sat in the corner reading quietly while I worked. We didn't talk about his family. Not really. But one evening, over takeout and soft blues playing from his phone, he said, "They tried to build me in their image. I'd rather help someone build something real." That night, we made a quiet pact. No going back, no calling them, no hoping they'd come around. I think that's what love looks like sometimes. Not grand gestures, just knowing when to stay out of someone's way and still be nearby. I filed for the LLC under the name BrightPath. It was simple. It stood for bright, as in hope, and path, like lineage. Only now the line would begin with me. 5 days later, my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I pressed play, my breath already catching, more from reflex than fear. My mother's voice came through, clipped and cold. "If you're still alive somewhere, stay gone. Mira is pregnant now. We don't need your drama." That was it. No greeting, no goodbye. I didn't cry. I saved the voicemail and filed it under a folder labeled Proof. Not for legal use. Just to remind myself that years from now, if I ever doubted whether walking away had been right, I could play it once and remember exactly what I'd left behind. That evening, I signed the final registration forms online for BrightPath Med. It wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. The ink had barely dried on the registry papers when I found myself under fluorescent lights, seated between strangers with laptops and investor lanyards. The co-working space was modern, all polished concrete and reclaimed wood, filled with startup energy. Loud, caffeinated, confident. I didn't quite belong. Not yet. But I showed up anyway. I'd borrowed a black dress that still fit around my belly and brushed my hair back in a low bun, hoping the quiet force behind my words would speak louder than the shape of my body. The pitch went fine. Sharp, clear, rehearsed. I'd practiced in the mirror, in my sleep, in the bathroom stalls between bouts of nausea. I'd written and rewritten every line of the product roadmap. My numbers weren't just good, they were airtight, but it only took one sentence to flatten everything. An older man, slick gray hair, tailored blazer, advisor tag clipped neatly to his collar, tilted his head after I finished speaking. Then, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, he said, "Impressive resume, but we've already had our fill of single pregnant founders trying to prove a point." The room didn't laugh. It didn't need to. No one defended me either. I nodded once, too tightly, and walked out. Outside, the Texas sun had softened into gold, but my lungs burned from the inside. I didn't let myself cry. Not yet. I pressed my hand over the place just beneath my ribs, the place where a second heartbeat lived, and told myself, keep walking. I made it as far as the bus stop before the nausea won. Bent over near a trash can, I retched until my throat was raw. Someone behind me, a woman in a stiff blouse and judgmental perfume, clicked her tongue and muttered, "Girls like that shouldn't breed." She didn't say it to me. She didn't have to. I found the nearest coffee shop, slipped into the restroom, and locked the stall. The cold of the toilet's water tank was the only solid thing to lean against. I didn't sob. It was worse than that. Silent tears so still I barely noticed until I tasted salt. My hands shook as I reached into my wallet. Hidden behind a card I never used was the photo I kept for no reason I could explain. Me and Grandma Senior at Mira's engagement party. We were both laughing, caught mid-smile. I'd worn a coral dress that day, she'd worn sage green. I looked closer. I always looked at her face, but this time I saw my own hand in hers. A moment I'd forgotten. Her palm tucked something into my ring. Not just any ring, hers. The one she wore when she married Granddad. The one she told me would be mine someday because you see people for who they are, not what they want from you. But at the will reading, it was Mira who showed up wearing it, smug as ever. Grandma said it belonged to the first daughter to marry, she'd announced, and no one questioned her. No one looked at me. I never said anything. I'd let the lie live because back then I still thought keeping the peace meant keeping the family. I folded the photo and tucked it back into my wallet like it was armor. When I stepped back outside, the sky was orange-pink, the streetlights flickering to life one by one. I walked without a destination, letting the city carry me forward. By the time I reached the quieter part of downtown, I found a bench near a dry fountain. I sat, opened my notebook, and wrote. Not to my parents, not to Jasper or Mira. I wrote to the people I hadn't met yet, the ones who might back BrightPath Med. I told them about the science, yes, but I also told them about the kind of founder I was becoming. You won't find someone more relentless than a woman who built everything after being told she was nothing. I didn't sign it with flair, just my name, Lila Evans. That night, I walked home with swollen feet and a cramp near my lower back. But I didn't feel small anymore. I felt lit. Not like fire, but like the ember you think went cold until it glows again in the dark. That morning, I woke before the sun. Something in me had shifted. Not dramatically, not like a movie moment with swelling violins, more like a quiet hardening, the kind that doesn't melt when someone apologizes late or says, "But we're family." I sat at the corner table in the shared workspace, laptop open, coffee cooling beside me. I adjusted the font on my pitch deck again, not because it needed it, but because I wanted it to feel intentional, deliberate. Every slide told two stories, the science and the survivor. When I added the final line, founded by Lila Evans, MD in progress, because bearing a life doesn't mean you disappear, I didn't hesitate to click save. That evening, the virtual startup showcase kicked off. 100 hopeful founders and boxes on a screen, dozens of muted judges. Thomas sat just outside my frame, not offering help, just steady presence. I waited my turn. When my face filled the main window and I began presenting, I didn't lead with trauma. I led with data, precise, forward-thinking, clean. Then I told the why. I built this not in spite of what I lost, but because of slide by slide, I mapped out a vision for the kind of medtech product that could quietly change women's lives. Low-cost, early disease detection for underserved clinics. The chat pinged. Reactions, questions. Then one judge leaned forward. He looked barely older than me. Sharp suit, sharper smile. "Wait," he said. "Evans, as in Mira Evans from the Austin Health Alliance." My jaw didn't clench. I didn't blink. "Oh," I said evenly. "I don't have a sister." The silence lasted just long enough. Then the chat erupted. "Hoo-ah, did she just—" Later that night, we ordered cheap tacos and ate them straight from the foil on the balcony of our shared place. The city lights shimmered like they always do when you're a little tired and a little proud. Then Thomas shifted beside me. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. I set down my taco. "My mother, she's friends with someone in your family. Your aunt. I think they went to school together." Still talk. My mouth went dry. "Aunt Clara?" He nodded. "She's the one who told my mom about the mess with you back before I knew any of this. And you didn't think to mention that?" I didn't want to lose you. It was a stupid answer. Honest, maybe, but still stupid. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood up, took a breath, and said, "No lies, no alliances with ghosts from my past. If I move forward, it's clean." He didn't defend himself. He just nodded, pulled out his phone, and one by one deleted every contact tied to that part of his world. I watched him do it, then I sat back down. The next afternoon, my inbox pinged. A subject line. Initial funding, BrightPath Med. It wasn't $1 million. It was $35,000, 0 cents. But it was from someone who'd watched the pitch and wrote, "Your conviction is unforgettable." I'd bet on that kind of clarity. I stared at the email until it blurred, not from tears, just disbelief. Then I printed the check, walked to the rooftop of the co-working space, and let the dry Austin wind slap my cheek awake. Below, glowing off the side of a building, a billboard flickered. Mira's face smiled beside a slogan about healthcare equity and charitable futures. It was a lie, just another image she wore better than truth. I folded the check in half, slid it into my blazer pocket, and whispered, "You can't erase what I've built just because you screamed louder first." By the time my company had a name, I no longer needed theirs. BrightPath Med wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of name you bragged about at a fundraiser. But it was mine. Every single part of it had been built on ground I scraped with my own hands. And that morning, I zipped up my blazer over my growing belly and stepped out into the sunlit morning. Not as someone's daughter, not as someone's sister, but as a founder. The Regional Health Innovations Conference was being held at a swanky downtown hotel, the kind with marbled floors and triple-shot lattes that cost more than a lunch. Thomas parked a few blocks down so I could walk in alone. It wasn't about dramatics. It was about reclaiming the space my name had once been erased from. But nothing prepared me for what I saw. Right outside the main conference hall stood a 12-foot-tall banner, silk-printed and perfectly lit, that read, "Women Leading the Future of Health, sponsored by the Mira Evans Foundation." And right there, front and center, was Mira's face, head tilted slightly, eyes modest, and arms crossed like she knew exactly how to pose for legacy. Below that, quotes, words pulled word for word from my research proposal. No attribution, no footnote, no mention of BrightPath Med. I stood still long enough that someone brushed past me and muttered, "You okay?" I wasn't, but I nodded. The moderator called the next name on the mic. Mine. I walked past that banner without touching it, without looking back. Mira was absent, of course. She only lent her face, never her presence, unless there was applause waiting. As I stepped up to the lectern, the room hushed. I clicked the remote. Slide 1. Data charts, disease response mapped over gestational stages. Slide 2. Underserved patient response rates in rural clinics. Slide 3. A photo, my hands cradling my stomach, a sticky note on the mirror that read, "You're not invisible. They just can't see what you're building yet." I took a breath. Then I spoke. But I'd built the science you're funding. Not with a dynasty, not with a PR firm, with a body no one believed could lead and a voice they tried to drown in family shame. No one moved. I ended with the final slide, a time-stamped email thread showing the first draft of my proposal, years before the foundation was created. Then I stepped down. Thomas met me at the foot of the stage, phone in hand. He'd been recording, already uploading, already captioned. The right twin mother. The tag caught like dry brush fire. My inbox began to fill before I even reached the parking garage. We made it to the car just as the sun dipped low, that kind of gold that makes everything feel warm even when your stomach is turning. Until I saw the windshield, spray paint in black, backstabber trash mom. Shame to the name. I stood there, not stunned, just still. Thomas rushed forward, cursing under his breath, but I walked calmly to the driver's side. There, under the windshield wiper, was an envelope with my name in perfect cursive. Inside, a cease and desist letter accusing me of defamation, demanding takedown of all posts, threatening to sue. At the bottom, Mira's signature. Thomas's face flushed with fury. "Do you want me to call the police?" I didn't answer. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder thicker than hers. Inside, screenshots of time-stamped research files, email threads with advisors, grant receipts, statements from lab assistants, copies of old mentorship logs, all with her name falsely attached to my work. I closed the folder slowly, tucking it under my arm. "Let her try," I said. "Let her swing first." I turned to Thomas and smiled, soft but sharp, because I brought the fire this time. The lawsuit was already drafted. I just hadn't hit send until now. And once I did, everything moved faster than I could have imagined. The silence between me and my family became legal paperwork. The ache in my chest became evidence, the sleepless nights, depositions. I arrived at the Austin courthouse early that morning. The air was dry, the sky clear in a way that made everything feel sharper. I wore the navy blazer my mother once said made me look too masculine for a daughter. I smiled while buttoning it that morning. She was right. It wasn't feminine. It was formidable. Inside the courtroom, the lights buzzed, the benches filled with quiet murmurs, and the squeak of legal pads flipping open. Thomas sat 3 rows behind me. No tie, just presence. That was enough. My attorney, a woman named Ellen, who had the calm fury of someone who'd clawed her way through decades of boardrooms, leaned over and said, "You ready to let this breathe?" I nodded once, then the first bomb dropped. "Your Honor," Ellen began, "we're not just bringing forward intellectual property theft. We have testimony from a former CDC grant officer confirming that Mira Evans used proprietary research authored by Lila Evans to secure both federal funding and nonprofit status." You could hear the air leave the room. The judge, a sharp woman with tightly coiled hair and a sharper gaze, didn't blink. "Proceed." And just then, the doors opened. Mira entered, wearing a white sheath dress and sunglasses that didn't match the fluorescent lights. Her heels clicked slowly, as if she were still on a stage. When her eyes met Tomas's seated form behind me, her jaw locked. She hadn't expected him to stand by me. That was her mistake. Mira's legal team, all polished teeth and performative civility, tried their angle. "This is a tragic misunderstanding among family," one of them said. "Grief, sibling rivalry, confusion over academic boundaries." I stood. The courtroom grew quiet again. "I'd like to submit additional evidence," I said. My voice didn't shake. I walked up to the bench, pulled a small USB from my purse and handed it to the clerk. "Audio files," I explained. "Conversations recorded outside my old bedroom. I had no idea they were being said loud enough to capture, but they were." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And what do these recordings contain, Miss Evans?" My mother, my sister, my aunt, all discussing how to cut me out because I was too stubborn to control. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I saw it ripple through the room, the unease, the shock, and in a strange, quiet flash, my mind pulled me backward. A younger me, sitting cross-legged on my childhood bed, the sound of laughter from the hallway. I remember freezing, hearing my mother say, "She's not smart, she's just difficult," like her father. That night, I'd curled into the smallest shape I could manage, but here, in this room, I stood tall. The judge took a long breath and nodded to the bailiff. "We'll recess to review the submitted recordings. In the meantime, I am granting a temporary injunction. Miss Mira Evans is barred from representing or financially benefiting from any material related to BrightPath Med, its subsidiaries, or any derivative works tied to the plaintiff's medical research." There it was. Not applause, not cheers, just silence, which in court is as loud as justice gets. As the crowd filed out, Mira looked around for someone, anyone, to walk out with her. Our parents sat on the opposite side of the room. My father looked down at his folded hands. My mother stared blankly ahead. They didn't move. Mira stood there, alone in a sea of whispers and camera flashes. Reporters surged toward me as I stepped into the sunlight outside. Reaper firs bridged toward my Evan. I paused, just long enough for the hush to spread again. Then I said, "No, I already did in court. I didn't go home to celebrate. I went back to the lab with my children asleep beside me. The space smelled faintly of ethanol and fresh paper. The overhead lights were dimmed, save for the desk lamp by the culture station. Eli and Aaliyah lay curled in matching blankets I kept tucked under my bench, their soft breaths rising in rhythm. One tiny foot had escaped, dangling over the edge of a cushion. I gently nudged it back under the quilt and kissed the crown of Elia's head. Their presence grounded me more than any court ruling ever could. My phone buzzed softly on the counter. A name I hadn't seen in years flashed across the screen. Dad. I hesitated, then tapped the email open. Subject: None. Hope you're proud. Mira is gone. We're alone now. No apology, no explanation. Just that line, like a stone thrown into a well, never waiting for the splash. I locked the screen and turned away. Instead of answering, I picked up the pipette and slid on a fresh pair of gloves. There was a compound waiting, one I'd been refining for weeks, a synthetic biomarker derivative I'd been researching for breast cancer. My mother never got the chance to fight long. The diagnosis had come too late, and the silence between us made the clock move faster than it already did, so now I worked in her name. Not to honor what she was, but what she never got to be. By the time the final drop had slid into the assay, dawn crept through the narrow lab windows. I looked at my children once more, still fast asleep, and I whispered, "We're okay now. All three of us." The sun warmed the soil under my nails as I dug. Thomas was in the background, installing a small wooden swing from the pergola beam. The twins took turns patting dirt over the fruit saplings. One apple, one pear. "Mommy, this one's Eli's tree," Elia said, wiping her brow like a tiny farmer. Eli nodded seriously, as if the roots themselves depended on his approval. It was just a narrow strip of earth behind the house, boxed in by white stucco and sun-faded brick, but it was ours. That morning, I felt my lungs stretch in a way they hadn't in years. The doorbell rang. A package sat on the stoop, plain brown wrapping, no return address. I opened it slowly. Inside, protected by thick cardboard, was a single photograph. My fingers froze. It was the picture, the one from my childhood, the one where I'd been cropped out years ago, just a corner of my arm left behind. But this time, I was there, smiling awkwardly, off-center in that hand-sewn green dress Grandma Senior had made. I turned it over, written in neat pen. "This is the version that matters. See?" Thomas walked up beside me, wiping sawdust off his hands. "I found it in one of her old photo albums," he said gently. "The original print before the edits." I nodded. I didn't need to say thank you. He already knew. Later, after the kids had gone down for their afternoon nap, we sat under the pergola with iced tea and silence. The kind of silence that comes only when no one's expecting answers anymore. Thomas looked over and asked, "Are you okay now?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the small grove we'd started, the way the swing creaked slightly in the breeze, the tiny shoe Elia had left by the planter. Then I looked down at my hands, stronger than before, lined from work, still stained faintly from the lab. Finally, I said, "I'm not just okay. I'm exactly who I was meant to be." Thomas reached for my hand, but didn't grip it tightly, just rested his fingers over mine like a quiet agreement. The twins burst out the door minutes later, chasing a butterfly, their laughter rising like a song. I sat back and watched them, a full breath in my chest, and thought, they erased me once. But I didn't fight to be remembered. I built something too real to ignore. Have you ever turned betrayal into strength, like Lila, to forge a life too real to ignore? Share below and connect with others. Follow for more inspiring stories.